Unit 16, India. Contents 16.1 Introduction, 16.2 The Path of Development, 16.3 Stagnation of Indian Economy, 16.4 Post-Independent Phase of Development, 16.5 The Present Scenario, Liberalisation, Privatisation and Globalisation, 16.6 ICT Revolution in India, 16.7 Poverty Estimates and Poverty Eradication Measures during the Reform Period, 16.8 Development and Social Sectors, 16.9 Conclusion, 16.10 Further Reading. Learning Objectives. The central objective of this unit is to explain development approaches of pre- and post-independence India, aims and objectives of India's financial plan, India's development policies since 1990 and impact of ICT's development and the policies of liberalization and privatization in the social sector. 16.1 Introduction. Though the 4 blocks of the book, one of this course of Sociology of Development, we have familiarized the concept and growth and modernization perspectives of development as well as the alternative approaches to the mainstream development perspectives. We saw how social and human factors became incorporated in the development discourse in the past few decades. The previous blocks, especially blocks 3 and 4, discussed the alternate development approaches that concentrate more on social and human aspects of development. As a continuation to this, block 5 discussed the development experience of some of the countries across the world. We begin with a discussion on the development experience of India. There is a tendency to look at countries as economies, and very often we view them as developed, developing and underdeveloped. The process of economic development refers to per capita income achieved in a particular year, but if we take into account the meaning of the word development as a whole, then it becomes evident that the overall development of all sections of populations of the society are not less important than the economic growth. In other words, development should occur at both levels, economic and social. For instance, if we find that per capita income has doubled in a particular country, but the basic problems like poverty, unemployment or inequality remains more or less the same, then naturally the word development loses its real meaning. Therefore, economic development should be related to human development. When we talk of development in relation to the social sector, we are in fact discussing development keeping in view the aspects of human development of all sections of the population. The present unit analyzes the state of development retrospectively. It looks into the colonial, post-colonial and current development policies of India. During the colonial period, India witnessed a retarded or stagnated states of economic development. Things started to changing with the attainment of independence when India opted for a planned development. With the accelerated pace of globalization and large role of international organizations such as World Bank and IMF in the national polity, there had a major shift in policies towards liberalization and privatization of economy, which in turn left its implications in both avenues of society. All these aspects are dealt in detail in this unit. 16.2 The Path of Development. The path to be followed for the development of any society cannot be easily determined, and it requires a great deal of planning before deciding on that. In independent India, planning derives its objectives from the directive principles of state policy as outlined in the Indian Constitution. It says, the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic and political shall inform all the institutions of national life. As is evident from the above, a lot of planning is required to accompany any kind of development. In fact, planning itself means securing a particular objective or a set of objectives. In the context of development, the sphere of planning is economic as well as social. Through the Planning Commission was set up in 1950 to prepare the blueprint of development. India had started making preparation for its even before independence, when the government were formed in various provinces in 1937 under the Government of India Act 1935. Formation of the Planning Commission. During the freedom struggle, a National Planning Committee was constituted by the Congress with Jawaharlal Nehru as chairman, with 29 subcommittees to work on different areas. The committee recommended to the state to play a vital role in the development of infrastructure and in the setting of basic industries under its aegis to promote the growth of cottage and village industries under protection, and to abolish all intermediary interest in land with a view to unleashing the forces of growth. It hoped to raise national income by 2 to 3 times in a span of 10 years, with a view to providing a balanced diet having calorific value of 2,400 to 2,800 units to an adult worker, 30 yards of cloth per person, and housing with at least 100 square feet per capita. Industrialization with emphasis on promotion of heavy engineering and machine making industries, electric power and scientific research institutes, accommodation of cottage and small scale industries, the dominant role of the state and of public sector in industrial development and national self-sufficiency to the extent possible were held out as the major planks of the policy. In order to achieve these objectives, 3 plans were submitted in 1944: the Mumbai Plan, the People's Plan, and Gandhian Plan. At the same time, a number of sectorial plans and plans for the education and health were also prepared. In 1946, when the interim government was formed with Jawaharlal Nehru as its executive head, an advisory planning board was constituted with recommended the formation of a National Planning Commission. Box 16.1, Bombay Plan, People's Plan, and Gandhian Plan. In the year 1938, National Planning Committee of the International Congress, Jawaharlal Nehru as chairman, had completed its works on a plan for the development of post-independence of India. Businessmen published their own plan, the so-called Mumbai Plan, in 1944. The signatories include J.D. Birla with a wide interest in the textiles, jute and insurance, J.R.D. Tata with the interest in iron and steel and in international airlines, and Kasturibai Lalbai with the interest in textiles and shopping. It provided the vision that guided Nehru into formulating the industrial and agrarian policy of India after independence. It carried a vision to develop India industrially and militarily to become a bigger power. To become a big power, it affirmed that practically every aspect of economic life would have to be rigorously controlled by the government. The Indian Federation of Labour, under the leadership of M.N. Roy, also put out its own plan, the People's Plan, also in 1944, in which primacy was given to employment generations through improvement in agricultural and developments of small-scale industry. Mahatma Gandhi and his Mahatma Gandhi and his disciples had their own Gandhian plan. All had eradication of poverty as their overarching objectives. The Gandhian approach to development focused on the village level economy. Such an approach wanted agriculture to be the mainstay of Indian economy and envisaged the creation of self-sufficient village units. Except the Gandhians, the others viewed state-promoted industrialization as the means for achieving the objectives and central planning as essential for their purpose. The Planning Commission was constituted on 15 March 1950 by a resolution of the Union Cabinet. The Commission was asked to prepare a blueprint of the first 5-year plan as a model of development. Since then, a number of 5-year plans have been launched while keeping in mind the needs and resources of the country. Before highlighting the various strategies of the 5-year plan of development, let us analyze the situations at the time of independence. Reflections and Action 16.1. Development can be explained only in terms of per capita income. Do you agree with this statement? If not, give reasons. 16.3. Stagnation of Indian economy. At the time of independence, the Indian economy was in a very state shapes. It was going through a period of stagnation characterized not only by the poverty but also by one of the lowest level of per capita income growth, which was approximately 0.5% per annum due to the long spell of colonialization. The same feeling were echoed in the first 5-year plan document, which was primarily because the basic conditions under which the economy can continuously expand were lacking. The impact of modern industrialism in the later half of 19th century was felt in this country initially through imports of machine-made goods from abroad, which reacted adversely on the traditional pattern of economic life. This also did not create the impulse for development along new lines. The transition that followed was characterized not by the expansion of industry and the diversification of economic structure, but by a decay of India's traditional arts, crafts and industries, and by an increasing pressure of populations on hand. The retrogression led to a decline in productivity per person engaged in agriculture. The result was a continuous increase in unemployment and underdevelopment, and the growth of an attitude of pathetic contentment on the part of the people. In such an environment, there could be little economic or social progress. Whatever surpluses might have been available in the colonial era were directed to the purchase of imports, partly of better finished products from abroad and partly of equipment for the new transportation system designed primarily in the interest of foreign commerce. The responsibility of promoting modern commerce and industry came to be concentrated in the hands of certain classes in the urban areas, and up to the end of the 19th century, the only major large-scale industries which had taken root in country were textiles. Little attention was paid to improvement of agriculture or to the needs of the rural areas. Reflections and Action 16.2. The Indian economy was going through a period of stagnation at the time of independence. What were the conditions responsible for the poor performance of Indian economy? 16.4. Post-independence phase of development. With the attainment of independence, India chose to follow the path of planning social and economic development, for which the Planning Commission was set up on 15 March 1950 under the chairmanship of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. Since then, Prime Minister of India has the ex officio chairman of Planning Commission. Having gone through the background of the Indian economy, we can now analyze the main aims and objectives of the various 5-year plans of development. A first 5-year plan, 1951 to 56. The first 5-year plan, in fact, paved the way for the planned economic development of the country. It had two main objectives. First, bringing Indian economy out of the state of stagnation caused by the Second World War and partition of the country. Secondly, to initiate the process of all-round balanced development of Indian economy so as to ensure a steady improvement in the living standards of the people over a period of time. The first plan accorded the highest priority to agriculture, with the special emphasis on rural reconstruction programs and land reforms, including initiation various irrigations and power projects. About 44.6% of the total outlay of rupees 2069 crore was allotted for its development. The plan projected rather optimistically that saving and investment as a proportion of national income would rise from an estimated 5 to 6% in the early 1950s to 20% in 1960 to 69 and stabilize at the level thereafter. Aggregate income was expected to double in approximately 20 years and per capita income in 27 years. B. Second plan, 1956 to 61. In 1954, Parliament declared that the economic policy should have to achieve a socialistic pattern of society with greater equality in income and wealth in sight. The main aim of the second plan was therefore to promote a pattern of development which could lead to the establishment of a socialistic pattern of society in India. The second plan was aimed at an increase of 25% of national income, a rapid industrialization with the particular emphasis on the development of basic and heavy industries, large expansion of employment opportunities, and reduction of inequalities in income and wealth, and a more even distribution of economic power. In the second plan, there was a special emphasis on industrialization. It also aimed at increasing the national income by 11% per annum by 1960-61. The development strategy of economic growth through modern industrialization was continued into the third plan. See, third plan, 1961 to 66. The immediate objective of the third plan, which was aimed at self-sufficiency, were to secure an increase in the national income of over 5% per annum, and at the same time ensure a pattern of investment which could sustain this growth of the rate of growth during subsequent plan periods. To achieve self-sufficiency in food grains and increase agricultural production to meet the requirements of industry and exports. To expand basic industries like steel, chemicals, fuel and power, and to establish machine building capacity so that the requirement of further industrialization could be met within a period of 10 years or so, mainly from country's own resources. To utilize fully the manpower resources of the country and ensure a substantial expansion in employment opportunities, and to establish progressively greater equality of opportunity and bring about reductions in disparities of income and wealth and a more even distribution of economic power. Therefore, in this strategy of development, the public sector was expected to promote the growth of infrastructural facilities like basic and heavy industries, and on the other hand, to reduce the concentration of economic power through the expansion of public ownership of means of production. The first phase of development over the first 3 to 5 year plans period was characterized by fairly sustained growth in per capita income, with an 8 to 10% compound growth rate of industrial output, 3 to 3.5% compounded growth rate in food grains output, and around 1.75% growth rate in per capita income, thus indicating a steady improvement compared to the pre-independence period. Annual plans 1966-69. During the 50s and 16s, there was a stable government, thus paving the right way of planning and development. However, the Indo-Pakistan conflicts in 1965, 2 successive years of severe drought, devaluation of the currency, general rise in prices, and erosion of resources available for planned purpose delayed finalization of the fourth plan. Therefore, instead of the fourth plan, 3 annual plans were formulated between 66 to 1969. Fourth plan, 1969 to 74. The fourth plan emphasized on improving the condition of the less privileged and weaker sections of society through the provision of employment and education. It aimed at raising the standards of living of peoples through various programs to promote quality, equality, and social justice. Fifth plan, 1974 to 79. During this period, the economy was facing severe inflationary pressures. Through the major objectives of the plan were to achieve self-reliance and to adopt measures for raising the consumption standards of the people living below the poverty line. Emphasis was also put on bringing inflation under control and to achieve stability in the economic situation. Reflections and Action 16.3. Having gone through various 5-year plans, can you pinpoint some of the main objectives as well as achievements and shortcomings of these plans? Sixth Plan 1982-85. The sixth 5-year plan was formulated after taking into account the achievements of shortcomings of past 3 decades of planning. The main objective of the plan was removal of poverty. Therefore, the strategy was adopted to strengthen the infrastructures for both agriculture and industry. There was also an emphasis on increasing opportunities for employment, especially on the rural areas. 7th Plan 1985-90. The main objective of the 7th Plan was to provide employment opportunities and to raise productivity as well as the growth in food grains production, with an emphasis on reducing poverty and improving the quality of life in poor villages and towns. 8th 1990-97 and 9th Plan in 1997-2002. Through the 7th 5-year plan went uninterrupted. There were unstable political developments such as assassination of former Prime Minister Sri Rajiv Gandhi, etc., resulting in short-lived governments and economic crisis due to shortage of foreign exchange. The 8th 5-year plan in 1992-97 was therefore launched after the return of normalcy in 1992, with its emphasis on the generation of adequate employment to near full employment by the turn of the century and to achieve self-sufficiency. The 8th plan was initiated against the backdrop of introduction of economic liberalization and structural adjustment programs to be discussed in the next section. This plan provided to be a turning point when the role of planning in development was questioned and analyzed from the various viewpoints. Therefore, the 9th plan was formulated viewing the role of the state and the private sectors as complementary, and both were considered essential. The plan had accorded priority to agriculture and rural development with a view to accelerate the growth rate of the economy. 10th Plan 2002-2007. Presently, the 10th 5-year plan is in operation with its emphasis on expansion of social and economic opportunity for all individuals and groups with the reduction in disparities and indicate target growth rate of 8% per annum. Growth rate of 8 per annum. As mentioned earlier, many changes in policies and programs were introduced, keeping in mind the needs and demands of the situation. These reforms, to be precise, can be summed up by the notions of liberalisation and privatisation and globalisation. In 16.5, the present scenario: liberalisation, privatisation and globalisation. India opened its economy in EC 1960s by adopting a new economic policy and structural adjustment program. Although there have been attempts for liberalizing Indian economy in 1980s, it was only from 1991 to 92 that the government of India had been implementing in earnest a fairly comprehensive economic reforms programs under the compulsion due to the balance of payment crisis. The details will be discussed in the subsequent unit as well, which forced the country to seek financial assistance from International Monetary Fund. The then prevailing perceptions among the international financial bodies with regard to the payment crisis among nations was that it was due to the faulty microeconomic policies that the country had been pursuing. They placed the growing inefficiency and the non-competitiveness of countries' products was due to the subversions of the market forces, which resulted from excess of government controls and quantitative restrictions, and the predominant position assumed by the public sector in the economy. India too was following similar economic policies. The problem faced by the country were sought to be solved by macroeconomic and efficiency promoting policies. Towards these directions, in the year 1991, India adopted new economic policy which promoted opening up of Indian economy through the process of liberalizations and privatization. This in turn accelerated the process of globalization of the country and led to a closer integration of Indian economy to the global market. The new economic policy of 1991 included standard structural adjustment measures. You will learn more about this unit in 21, including the devaluation of the rupee, increase in interest rates, reduction in public investment and expenditure, privatizations along with the priority accorded to profitability in running public enterprises, reduction in public sector food and fertilizer subsidies, increase in imports and foreign investments in capital intensive and high tech activities, and abolition of cash compensatory support for exports, a very rapid transitions to a more or less market driven exchange rate system, encouragement of the inflow of foreign capitals through opening up venues for foreign institutional investment, and consideration and considerable relaxation of controls for direct investment, significant scaling down of net central bank credit to the government to meet its financing requirement, and to the large measures of autonomy granted to the RBI for maintaining the country's internal and external balance. There was also abandonment of import substitution policy and faced liberalizations of trade, the effects of which primarily was on composition of domestic production and absorption. A more market-friendly system was put in place after the initiation of reforms in 1991, except for a few strategic industries. The government license system for establishment and capacity expansion was abolished. International trade was liberalized to promote competitions and efficiency by removing almost all the important quota, except on consumer goods, and reducing tariff rates to moderate levels. Foreign investment was promoted to modernize technology and take advantage of global division of labor. Globalization of Indian economy. The term globalization in the context of the economy refers to reduction of trade barriers with a view to allowing freer flow of goods to and from the country. B. Free flow of foreign capital for investment. C. Free flow of foreign capital technology. And D. Free movement of labor and manpower. Globalization of the Indian economy refers to the integration of the Indian economy with the world economy by way of liberalization and opening it up for private investment. These reforms have been introduced to improve and meet the challenges of the Indian economy. Reflections and Action 16.4. Discuss the changes accorded with the adoption of new economic policy to the Indian economic policy pursued since independence. Liberalization and privatization of trade, industry, finance and infrastructure. Over the years, starting from 1991, there has been a steady liberalization of Indian economy. International trade has been liberalized and more sectors opened up for foreign direct investment. And portfolio investment, facilitating entry of foreign investors in telecom, roads, sea and airports, insurance and other major sectors. In 1991, Government of India introduced several liberalization measures relating to trade in various stages. This include automatic approval of up to 51% of equity in high priority industries, and trading companies engaged in exporting 100% equity in export oriented units subject to some conditions, and NRIs and overseas corporate bodies were allowed to invest up to 100% equity in high priority industries, etc. In 1996-97, there was further liberalization by including 13 more sectors under the 51% equity automatic approval route, extending up to 50% equity participation in 3 new areas relating to mining, and enhancing the equity limit to 75% for automatic approval in 9 priority areas, and reconstitutions of Foreign Investment Promotion Board were announced. In the next year, FDI in financial services was allowed through the FPIB route, and 15 non-banking financial services from FDI were identified. The automatic route for FDI approval in certain infrastructural activities was simplified. Further liberalization of FDI was announced in each subsequent year, including permitting up to 26% foreign equity participations in domestic insurance companies in 1999, and in 2000 placing of investment in all sectors except a small negative list under automatic route for FTA approvals. Foreign portfolio investment was liberalized in 1995-96, permitting NRIs and OZBs and foreign institutional investors to invest up to 24% equity in Indian companies. This limit was raised to 30% in 1998 to 99. FII were permitted in invest in India government's dated securities from March 1997 and treasury bills from April 1998. A number of steps liberalizing the access to Indian companies of foreign capitals through global depository receipts and American depository receipt were announced every year in 1995. External commercial borrowing rules and procedures were liberalized as well since 1995. Despite this liberalization, measures in India could attract much less FDI compared to China and other Southeast Asian economies such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. India's limited success in long-term capital inflows, particularly FDI, might be attributed to 3 factors. First, heavy regulations have not completely gone after liberalization. Second, there is resistance to FDI by domestic industry in competing areas. Third, inadequacies in physical and legal infrastructure limit India's absorptive capacity and hence it's the attractiveness to private foreign investments. As a part of the liberalization of industrial sector, industrial licensing, irrespective of the level of investment, was abolished in July 1991 for all except 18 industries. In 1998-99, 12 of these have been removed from licensing requirement. The number of industries reserved for development exclusively by the public sector has been reduced from 17 in 91-92 to 3 by 2001. These two are 2 major reforms. The Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969 was amended in 91-92, removing the threshold limits of assets in respect of applications of MRTP and of a dominant undertaking. The Competition Bill incorporating a major competitive law was introduced in Parliament in 2001 on the abolition of reservation of products for production by small-scale industries from 97 until 2003. In all, 163 products have been de-reserved. The main thrust of reforms in the financial sector was on the creation of efficient and stable financial institutions and markets. Reforms in respect of the banking as well as non-banking financial institutions focused on creating a deregulated environment and enabling free play of market forces, while at the same time of strengthening the prudential norms and the supervisory system. In the banking sector, the particular focus was on imparting operational flexibility and functional autonomy with a view to enhancing efficiency, productivity, and profitability, imparting strength to the system and assuring the financial soundness. Reforms in financial markets focused on removal of structural bottlenecks, introduction of new players, instruments, free pricing of financial assets, relaxation of quantitative restrictions, improvement in trading, clearing and settlement practices, more transparency, etc. Reflections and Action 16.5. What were the steps taken by the Indian government to liberalize Indian industry and financial sector? Examine the social implications of that. As a part of privatization of public sector units, disinvestment equity was started in December 1991, and the Disinvestment Commission was set up during 91-92 for identifying PSUs for equity investment and for suggesting modalities of disinvestment. The pace of disinvestment was not so satisfying during the first decade of reforms, and realized revenues from the sale of public equity being modernized. Roughly 35% of the target of rupees 78,300 crores were realized in the period of 91-92 to 2002 to 2003. The successful privatization of Bharat Aluminium Company Limited, particularly its affirmation by the government Supreme Court after it was challenged, changed the climate for privatization for better. Although a good number of PSUs had been disinvested either by the sale of equity or through strategic sales, the political disagreements in disinvesting high-profile PSUs such as Indian Airlines, Air India, etc., suggested that the political economy considerations are still unfavorable to large-scale disinvestment in our country. Privatization in infrastructure sectors began with the amendment of relevant legislations to permit private enterprise to enter power generations in October 1991, but not much headway was created in this sector even after a decade and a half. Whereas reforms have been much successful in telecommunication sector, valued addition services were opened to private sector in 1992, followed by the enunciation of the National Telecom Policy in 1994 to 95, which opened up the basic telecom services to completion. Foreign equity participations up to 49% was permitted in case of a joint venture between an Indian and a foreign terms. The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI, was established in 1997 in order to separate the service providing functions of publicly owned telecom enterprises and the policy making functions, both of which were initially with the Department of Telecommunications. A separate Department of Telecommunication Services was set up in 1999 to 2000. The two public sector service providers were corporatized in 2000 to 2001. International long distance business, which was public sector monopoly, was opened up to unrestricted entry in 2002 to 2003. The Universal Service Support Policy came into effect in April 1, 2002, under which an universal service levy at 5% of adjusted gross service revenue of all telecom carriers except pure value added service providers has been fixed. The Universal Service Fund, financed by the levy, will subsidize access to the public and community funds in villages as well as individual household funds in net high cost rural remote areas. The two basic goals of reforms were delivering low cost voice telephony to the largest possible number of individuals and delivering low cost high speed computer networking to the largest number of firms. Roads sector is another field of infrastructure reforms. key reforms was the creation of a major new source of funding for national, state and rural road constructions called the Central Road Fund. Under the Central Road Fund Act of 2000, the National Highway Development Project financed by CRF, one of the largest single highway projects in the world. In its introduction to the nearly 6,000 km of Golden Quadrilateral connecting the four metropolises Chennai, Delhi, Calcutta and Mumbai and 7,300 km of north, south and east-west corridor, Indian Railway have undertaken several reforms improving their functioning. The government has approved restructuring of four metro airports, Chennai, Delhi, Kolkata and Mumbai, to make them world class, and approval in principle has been granted for setting up new international airports in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and go with the private sector participation in 2003. Reflections and Actions 16.6. Have you read in newspapers the political debates related to the disinvestment in telecom sector? Is your opinion what are the positive and negative impacts of privatization of telecom sectors? Impact of reforms in economic and social sector. It is a decade and a half that India adopted a new economic policy and fall into the line in the path of a liberalization of economy. A drastic policy shift from that of a mixed economy. The policy followed till 1990 will definitely show its impact both in the economic and social fronts. Let us take a stock of these impacts here. It needs to be stressed here that all these macroeconomic indicators cannot be attributed to reform programs only. If we look at the positive impact in the economic front, we can see that after a dip in the GDP growth rate, along with a sharp absolute decline in aggregate investment during 91-92, there was a support in GDP growth from 92 to 93 onwards. In the first half of the financial year 2005 to 2006, in the economy grew up in 8.1% compared to 7.1% of corresponding period in the previous year. Indeed, not only were growth rates of GDP here, capita income and capital accumulation higher in 92 to 2001 than the corresponding averages in 70s and 80s. There was also a considerable fall in the poverty ratio from 36 to 26% between 93 to 94 and 99 to 2000. The performance of economy was quite remarkable in the external sector. There was considerable improvement in balance of payment, increase in the foreign exchange reserves, a sharp decline in the short-term debit as percentage of forex reserves, etc. The economy also become much more open since economic reforms, and there was a rise in economic share of exports in world trade from below 0.5% to nearly 0.6 in over a period of 1 decade. Following are some of the major accomplishments of the financial reforms. Domestic deregulation of industry, dismantling the system of industrial licensing and production controls which enhanced the domestic competition. Liberalization of trade and significant drop in tariff rates. Liberalization of financial sector. Along with these positive growth tendencies, there also had been some negative trends. After managing a rapid recovery, Indian economy lost its growth momentum within a few years of inception of economic reforms. The average GDP and per capita income growth during 1997-2001 was significantly lower than the 90-1997. The second and no less distributing development during the 1990s was the extremely low growth of overall employment, belaying the expectations that the reforms programs through stimulation of labor-intensive activities would help harnessing in the growth process of countries' huge untapped human resources. At the latest economic survey reveals between the period 1983 to 94 and 94 to 2000, the average annual growth rate of total employment recorded a steep fall from 2.04% to 0.98%. The financial sector reforms have been much more comprehensive than reforms in other areas. However, this sector also has displayed quite a few negative developments. The most important of these are a decline in bank credit to the commercial sector, an increasing bank holding of SLR securities far excess of the stipulated minimum, and B, failure of the capital market, especially during 95-2000, to provide a finance for domestic capital formation. Another impact of the opening up of Indian economy was that it was being subjected to external financial shocks to a greater extent than in 1980s or before. In the social sector too, globalization features both negative and positive tendencies. Unemployment due to replacement of the traditional technology by modern technology has made its negative impact, whereas availability of new opportunities in the employment market has made it positive impact. Study by Seva Academy on the impact of globalization on informal sector shows that globalization of Indian economy has both positive and negative effects on the sector. For example, introduction of machinery in construction sector has resulted in a decrease in labor demand at under areas, urban areas, whereas increase of in the rural areas, as rural areas are also going for houses made of cement and bricks rather than mud. On the other hand, increased demand of embroidery work in global market has increased the work in embroidery workers. On the other hand, garment workers have undergone through the positive as well as negative effect of globalization. Increased in demand of garment has increased the work in garment sector, but continuous change in fashion world has demanded a continuous upgradation of work quality, which found to be difficult with workers in informal sector. Even the small and marginal farmers have gained from the globalization, as they are able to cultivate their land thrice in a year with the advancement of technology, but excessive use of fertilization pesticides has decreased the overall profits of the farmers. Reflection and action 16.7. Examine the liberalization of trade in labor standards in India. Take cues from the newspaper reports, etc. Due to liberalization and globalization of advanced technologies, instruments and medicines in the field of medical science are available even in our countries. Thus, with the help of telemedicine today, specialized doctors of USA and Germany can assist the ongoing operations in India. Also, India is now producing advanced equipments required for operation. This has effectively reduced the cost prices of items needed during operations. After the government of India lifted price control over drugs, tough competition has been found among drug manufacturers. As well as a result, the cost of some drugs has reduced. Despite these positive aspects, there are some negative aspects of globalizations in the health sector. For example, some essential and life-saving drugs have become expensive during the removal of price control, and also many more irrational drugs are available in the market than before. Other than this, today new high-order antibiotics are prescribed for minor conditions like cold and cough. This has in turn resulted in drug resistance.